Toyota Tacoma is one of the most iconic mid-size trucks ever produced, and in this video we are focusing on several generations of the icon to see how the Tacoma has progressed over the years. Let's start out in 1984.
Now, back in the 1980s, the name Tacoma didn't actually exist yet. This was just called the Toyota pickup. This particular fourth generation model went from 1984 to 1988. One interesting thing about this generation of Toyota truck is that they started out solid front axle, and you can see this 1984 model has that solid front axle, but in 1986, they actually went to independent front suspension. And if this front end looks familiar to you, that's because this is also the basis for the first generation 4Runner. Now, not only does this truck have these super rad graphics that give you all these gold and brown bars, which is very 80s, but it's got a simple thin tailgate. It's not dampened, it's nothing complicated. This is such an easy bed to reach over into, which pretty much just doesn't exist today. And this truck is even 4-corner leaf springs. It really doesn't get simpler or more retro than this. This generation of Toyota truck had tons and tons of different engine options that you could place under the hood of this, including the legendary 22RE, which is 2.4 liter, super reliable, about 105 horsepower. You could also get this with a turbocharged 4-cylinder or a diesel in the US all the way up to 1986. But what we have right here is the 22R, which is carbureted instead of fuel injected like the 22RE. So much of this truck is cool, but I think nothing is cooler than the interior here. I mean, first off, you have this very 80s color scheme. You've got these tweed seats. Everything is brown and tan. Look at this big long throw shifter. You've got obviously an actual lever to engage your 4-wheel drive and low range, which is something that you're just not gonna see today. You've got these gauges with this cool grid pattern behind them. This era of interiors is super cool, and seeing one in this condition is really impressive. Dude, this is the coolest.
This thing is really cool, Case.
And even carbureted, it starts right up.
Case, this truck is really interesting from a dimension standpoint because the bed is 88 inches long, which is 7.3 feet long, but the overall truck is tiny, so it's very dimensionally small on the outside with this really huge bed out back.
Yeah, I mean, look at us. We're pretty much shoulder to shoulder. But this is such a cool era of trucks because they are so dirt simple. And this long throw shifter, the super light clutch that's in this, and it's definitely pretty agricultural ride quality that we have here. Still softly sprung. It doesn't ride like an HD truck or anything, but you can tell that this truck is genuinely old school.
This truck was built for work. You know, this was not a truck meant to take the family to the store or to church, right? This is a single cab with 2 seats and a big bed in the back. This is a long bed configuration. And that's what it was designed to do, is just haul as much as possible and be a relatively affordable way to get the most mileage out of a pickup.
And a little behind the scenes, we're just driving around this parking lot here because these vehicles are really special. This is part of Toyota's Heritage Collection, and so this is not the kind of thing that we can take out on the road because they're not even registered.
Yeah, right. I mean, these trucks are basically in brand new condition. But, Case, let's do a quick acceleration and kind of see what this truck would have accelerated like back in the day with 100 horsepower.
Yeah, so let's go mat it. That's actually not too shabby.
Yeah, you know, considering that you're on leaf springs and certainly drum brakes in the rear, that's not a bad little accelerating truck. The next generation of Toyota pickup we are looking at started production in the late 1980s and continued to the mid-1990s when it was replaced by the first generation Tacoma. So in this gen of Toyota truck, they were still referring to them as the Toyota pickup. That was the make and the model. And this generation had a lot of improvements over the previous gen. From a design standpoint, this 1989 does differ from the 84 in a number of ways. Some easy ways to tell are the triangular corner lights and the more rounded wheel arches. And this generation of Toyota pickup only came with independent front suspension, and this 4-wheel drive truck uses torsion bars in the front. By the late 1980s, Toyota had dramatically pared down its engine options for the US market, and this engine option was a 150 horsepower 3-liter 3VZE V6 engine, fuel injected, great engine, made right around 150 horsepower. Now, stepping inside this 1989 Toyota, the interior has gotten a little bit more modern, a little bit less kind of squared off and blocky with some more conventional controls. So we have this sweeping dash binnacle design. We still, of course, have the 5-speed manual transmission with the manual selector for the low-range transfer case and 4-wheel drive, and then we have this iconic Toyota parking brake lever. But now we have a 3-spoke steering wheel with cruise control. We're starting to see some luxuries. We also have power windows, power mirrors, power door locks, and a really cool feature behind me. Nowadays, it seems that every truck on the road is a full-fledged 4-door crew cab, but back in the day it was pretty rare, especially in a small truck. And this generation of Toyota pickup was the first to offer the extra cab, which was an extended cab design that allowed space to store stuff and a place to store humans, although not a great place to sit, to be honest. Not only headroom, but knee room is terrible. This was not a very safe place to sit either because you have no headrest. You know, this was a funny era in pickup. Like, Ford had the sideways facing seats. Toyota had these little seats back here which would fold up. This was definitely intended more for things rather than people. Some other cool things on this truck, you gotta love this very late 80s, early 90s graphic, this kind of triangle design down the side of the vehicle. These big chunky tires, the ground clearance is actually really impressive on this vehicle, and these iconic split rim wheels. And then out back you might notice there's no bumper, and that's because the bumper was actually an option on these trucks, believe that or not. But you know, a very usable small truck, and even with 4-wheel drive, it's still easy to reach down into the bed. This was the first era of pickup to be built here in the US as well, in Fremont, California, at the Numi plant, where they now build Teslas. So that plant has gone from building probably one of the most durable trucks of all time to building Teslas of questionable quality. Pretty interesting. Wow, Case, what a difference, even from 84 through 89. Huh?
It's true. To your point, it does feel a lot more modern in here.
Now, this truck, I will say, right, we got bolsters on the seats, much more comfortable.
Sporty, even.
But it still has a lot of the same attributes that make that previous truck so special, like these huge windows with these really thin pillars.
Yeah.
You want to take out the sunroof panel?
Yeah, let's do that. So look at that, we got some extra light in here. If we really wanted to, we could even pop it.
Pop that up.
Look at that, ventilation.
Woo! We're in a luxury driving experience now. So 5-speed manual transmission in this truck. Of course, you could get automatic transmissions as well, but this really is the powertrain you want, the 3-liter V6 with the 5-speed manual.
Yeah, man, I mean, that's what makes this an old school truck, is keeping it analog and having that long throw to your manual transmission. Just, it makes it feel all the more old school, all the more agricultural.
Yeah, right, and it just makes it a really special driving experience. And you know, not a ton of space in this cab by modern day standards. We're still pretty close to each other.
Yeah, for sure.
But you know, you sit really high in these trucks, and I think that's one of the differences I'm noticing from the new ones is just how tall you are, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, this is still a very narrow truck, but even so, you're still up pretty high and you've got a nice commanding view.
Oh, totally, yeah, and you got this beautiful smooth 3-liter V6 up front and a much better ride quality because of that independent front suspension.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's not as agricultural in its ride quality. This truck feels a lot more modern, but they're both pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, the interior is not as cool in this truck, let's be honest.
No, the more curved dash just feels a little less special.
All right, let's do a quick acceleration test. Full throttle. I think we may be missing a few ponies, Case.
Yeah, you know, this truck is obviously not brand new. I mean, it's got 40,000 miles on the clock, which is about as brand new as any truck like this is going to get. But I think because it's a little heavier, a little more substantial than the old truck, I'm not sure it's actually that much faster.
Right, it is definitely a larger, heavier truck. I think the curb weight on this is 4,600 pounds, so it's a sizable increase in weight compared to the older truck. But still have these cool retro gauges, still have some really cool features inside and out of this old Toyota pickup.
Now what we have here is a slight departure from the smaller trucks we've been looking at. So this isn't really something that was along the lines of the Tacoma, but rather this Toyota T100 tried to bridge the gap between trucks like the Tacomas and bigger vehicles like a lot of the American trucks that we know today. Since the T100 was bigger than a mid-size but smaller than a full-size, here in the US, and the US and Canada is specifically what this truck was built for, it still never really found a market because I think it kind of confused buyers at the time. Toyota did this as a move to try not to upset the big three manufacturers, to try and make something that was a slightly different offering, but their peak sales figures on these were around about 40,000 units, whereas Chevy and Ford were closer to 800,000 units. Another reason why these trucks never really caught on is because you couldn't get them with a V8. You could have a 3-liter V6 with 160 horsepower, or you could have this 3.4-liter V6 with 190 horsepower, and actually there was a TRD supercharged option that got you 260 horsepower, but even so, it never quite had the draw of that American V8. These T100s were produced between 1993 and 1998, and you can definitely tell by the look of the interior. There's a lot of plastic, but I do like these nice patterned cloth seats that you get here, and it's cool to see one of these interiors in good condition. Now, something about these trucks that's worth noting is that these were the last Japan-built trucks for the US market, and that's probably partly because being assembled in Tokyo meant there was a 25% tariff on these. One of the really cool things about the T100 is that this was the first imported truck that was able to fit a 4x8 sheet of plywood in the back, which is really important by truck people's standards. And another interesting little tidbit when it comes to the history of these trucks is that after the T100, Toyota wanted to make a truck and they wanted to call it the T150. However, Ford threatened to sue because the T150 name was too close to their F-150 name, so Toyota instead called it the Tundra, and I think that's a much better name anyway. Now, when you say the name Tacoma these days, this is the truck that most people think of. It's the third generation Tacoma that they've been building since 2015. You could have it in a bunch of different configurations too, an extended cab or a crew cab, short bed or long bed. Under the hood, you could have one of two different options. You could either have this 3.5-liter V6 that replaced the old 4-liter V6, or you could have a 2.7-liter 4-cylinder, which, to be honest, especially up in the mountains where we're based, is pretty anemic. This 3.5-liter V6 has 278 horsepower, and it's paired to a 6-speed automatic transmission, which also, by today's standards, not the most modern powertrain. Inside of the third-gen Tacoma, you'll find an interior that, by my book, has aged reasonably well. This dash is very squared off. It's got a masculine look to it. This part of it doesn't look too dated. The screen here that's in the center, it's a little small. It's got big bezels. So it's not a bad thing to now have updated with a new generation of Tacoma, but all in all, these are pretty good interiors and really durable. This configuration of the Tacoma is what you saw in most third gens. This is a crew cab short bed. You could also have the long bed, which is a 6-foot bed with the crew cab as well. But another big deal thing about this generation of Tacoma was having the name here stamped into the tailgate.
I mean, these are very capable, reliable trucks, but this generation in particular has a couple of issues that I have a hard time getting around, which is primarily centered around the engine.
Yeah, this powertrain, you know, this 3.5-liter V6 paired with this 6-speed automatic, by today's standards, it feels dated. This transmission hunts gears a lot, and a lot of times, especially up in the mountains, you really have to rev these out to accelerate if you're going uphill on I-70.
That said, there are some things they do really well. So you have this kind of weird driving position where your butt is close to the floor, but it also means that everything is tucked up super high underneath. So off-road, these things really excel because they have a lot of ground clearance and you don't have a lot of low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, which is really good. And these trucks are phenomenal off-road, not only because of that, but they also have fantastic ride quality. And a lot of those things combined is part of what's made this, for a long time, the best-selling mid-sized truck.
And I also think that these interiors are super cool, but as Case kind of rolls under the throttle here, you'll see what we mean about the acceleration. Like, they're good, especially in a first gear, but when you're on the highway trying to maintain speed, they do struggle a little bit, especially at elevation.
Well, and the thing about it that's just not very trucky is that you do really have to wring out this engine to get the power out of it. And in a truck, it's kind of nice to have some more low-end torque.
And now for 2024, we have an all-new version of the icon, the brand new Toyota Tacoma, based on what they're calling the TNGA-F architecture. This Tacoma has a lot of big improvements over the 2023. Every version of the new Tacoma comes with a turbocharged engine, which hasn't been seen in the US since the 1980s when you could get that turbocharged 22 RETE. But this engine now is a 2.4 liter. The base one makes 228. Every other one makes 278. And for the first time ever in a Tacoma, there's a 326 horsepower hybrid. What's really cool about this comparison today is all the trucks we've looked at have been SR5s, and that's a nameplate that dates back generations. But this truck is still available in a number of different cab and bed configurations, including an access cab. It is not possible to get a standard single cab in the 2024 Tacoma. That is a change over some of the older trucks. But this is a very attractive design. I really like all the crisp angles, the way this cab is kind of swept back and comes to a point back here. And out back, we'll see a couple of similarities to 2023. Now out back, the Tacoma still has the composite bed, just like the previous generation. Lots of useful tie downs and cutouts for wood planks, that kind of thing. Very large tailgate as well. The towing capacity on this new truck, 6,500 pounds when properly equipped. One of the really cool things about the new 2024 Tacoma is all the different configurations. So just like the old model, you have the TRD trims like the Sport, the Off-Road, and the Pro, but now we have new models like the Trail Hunter, which is kind of broadening the appeal of the Tacoma. One of the big changes you'll notice though from this SR5 to the previous SR5s is the focus on fuel economy and aerodynamics with this large chin spoiler. Compare this chin spoiler to that 1989. Obviously a lot more approach angle on that truck, but a lot worse fuel economy. It's really cool to see the progression of the Toyota pickup from the early generations to the early Tacomas and of course to the new 2024. The trucks have gotten longer, the cabs have gotten longer, and the beds have certainly gotten a little bit shorter, but the trucks are still very capable, very durable, and very long lasting. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Which one is your favorite? And a huge thank you to Case for making this video happen.